10 if you want to go ahead and get your Bibles ready. And I am very blessed and very excited to preach this particular passage because this is the perfect morning to follow up on our adult Bible study lessons. So at 9:30 on Sunday mornings, if you didn't know, we do have an adult Bible study class. And just an hour ago, we looked at ways that the New Testament writers use and reference and quote the Old Testament. So for all of those that joined us in the class this morning, you're going to be very familiar with some of what I'm going to talk about this morning, because our passage in 1 Corinthians 10 to follow on, to continue on in our Sunday morning series in 1 Corinthians, it's going to hit those themes. It's going to talk about those ideas, and we're going to reference the Old Testament a lot, and it's going to be great. But I would definitely encourage you, if you don't already, come join our adult Sunday school class. Give us a visit. Next week, I'm bringing cookies. If we're going to get good cookies, I'll try to get either Beth or Callie to make them. If I make them, I understand if you don't want to come. So, but I'm bringing cookies next week. We're finishing up our Old Testament survey, and then we're going to get into some question and answer things, and then some just a really exciting series to come. But I'm getting sidetracked here. We learned a couple of different ways that the New Testament writers use the Old Testament. One of them is direct quotation. You know, it'll come in and it'll say something like, the scripture says, or it is written, or David said, whatever it may be. So it's direct quotations, kind of like Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. You may know where that comes from, or no, I am your father. Or hello, my name is Indigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Direct quotations, except from way better sources, that is, the Bible. But with those are direct quotations, right? Taking the words of something and directly saying those. So the Old Testament writers are directly quoted in the New Testament sometimes. Sometimes they're just allusions. They're grabbing some words, grabbing some phrases, referencing back to the earlier events, those earlier things, but maybe without the precise wording or the it is written formula. And we're going to see a bunch of both of those this morning in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So keep an eye out for those. Keep an eye out for when it references those Old Testament stories, because then we're going to look at those verses and see what it's doing there. But in 1 Corinthians 10, this directly follows 1 Corinthians 9. Everybody tracking? We're doing good this morning? It's great, because 1 Corinthians 9, it ends this way. Do you know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one receives a prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. And as Pastor looked at a little bit last week, Paul is talking, he's saying this with all the focus, with all the power, with all the energy, with all the sacrifice poured into sports by anyone from top Olympians to even the middle school baseball teams. We should be echoing that intensity, that focus in our living out and declaring the gospel, our living out God's principles, our being holy as God is holy. We should focus in on that. Why? Because he doesn't want to be disqualified. It's sad to say, but that reality is clear. Some have fallen, some have sinned, and Paul is determined not to be one of those guys, which does mean he needs to focus. He needs to be disciplined. He needs to put all of his power and his energy into doing right and declaring the gospel and not falling. Even over the past couple of months, 2 pastors that I greatly admired, Kenny Baldwin and Wayne Hardy, both were found in very deep, very long-standing sin. And in Kenny Baldwin's case, illegal and horrible activity that immediately disqualified both of those men from the pastorate and qualified, if the allegations are true, Kenny Baldwin for severe legal consequences. Now, many don't suffer those particular consequences, but perhaps you will, or something else. Many parents express regret when they maybe greedily chased careers so much that they missed out on key moments with their kids. Or others who spent every Sunday on the baseball diamond only to wonder why their kids hate church and hate God and maybe even hate them. Others cheated on their spouses and found themselves divorced. Others dove hard into drugs or alcohol or pornography or other addictions that shipwrecked their lives. Paul doesn't want that for his readers, and God doesn't want that for you. God wants us to share in the blessings of the gospel, in the blessings of a life well lived, in the blessings of a faithful life, a blessed life. Just like, you know, Jesus in the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, where he says, blessed are the. But here's the thing, he sets conditions on experiencing those blessings. He says, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the meek, blessed are the pure in heart, right? Paul is picking up that theme. If you want to experience all of the fullness of God's blessings, a good life, a rich life in God's goodness, that kind of a life, you must follow God faithfully. God cares for you, but you can't disqualify yourself. And Paul ends chapter 9 talking about that, and he warns us because it's so easy to be drawn aside with our lusts and our passion and our desires in big ways and little ways to keep ourselves from experiencing all that God has and instead fall by the wayside. And so we may think, oh, that's not going to be me. That's not going to be me. But here's the thing. Paul is about to launch into a lot of Old Testament examples where the people of God, the people called by God, disqualified themselves and failed and messed up. And he's using these as examples to warn us, saying, hey, this is not a good road you're going down. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 5 is what I'll read right now. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from that spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Whew. So Paul starts out with this phrase, I do not want you to be unaware, brothers. And that kind of has the same energy, the same vibe of a teacher looking at her students and saying, don't forget this, it will be on the test. We have some school teachers, I think, in here, former school teachers. Sort of like a professor saying, now you probably want to write this down, right? So let's all get our number 2 pencils out and start maybe taking some notes, right? Because we need to pay attention. Paul is saying something very important, and he does not want us to be unaware of it. But speaking of being aware of things, what's the first thing that grabbed your attention in reading that? For me, it was a repetition of a word 5 times in those verses. All. Did you catch that? Well, it was all the alls over and over and over. 5 times he says this all. And this group, this all, he also refers to as our fathers. So time for a little bit of a history lesson. Remember, Paul was a Jew. He was Jewish. So the fathers he's speaking about are his ancestors, the Jewish people. And we see that in the stories he's referencing in just a minute. So these fathers, these people, they all had the same experiences, all together as a group, all together as a clan, all together as a budding country. And these experiences are seen in the Old Testament. And God cared for them in incredible ways. And Paul is reminding these Christians here, just as the Scripture is reminding us today, that we stand in a long line of God followers. We have a heritage. We are part of a long legacy of God dealing with his people, and his people either obeying or disobeying. So let's look at this and see what's going on. Now, it says this, right? For our fathers were all, here we go, right? All under the cloud. Well, okay, he's talking about a whole lot more than just, some storm clouds that go over their head. What's he talking about? He's talking about Exodus 13:21, and some other verses too, but that one in particular. And the Lord went before them. He was guiding Israel. How? By day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. So the nation of Israel, they had been rescued by God out of Egypt. We've got the 10 plagues and the Exodus and all the things. They're going out into the wilderness. They don't have any maps. God is going to guide them, and he does so by a giant cloud, a pillar of cloud, a tornado, if you would, by day, and a flaming pillar of fire by night. So they are all following God under this cloud, by this cloud. This pillar of cloud is guiding all of the people of Israel through the wilderness. So all of them had God's guidance through the wilderness, and then passed through the sea. I think we may know that one, right? Exodus 14:22, for example. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So the people of Israel, they come out of Egypt, but there's a bit of a roadblock in the way. There's that big old Red Sea. And so God split the waters of the Red Sea, dried up the land in the middle, and the people all walked through the dry seabed to get to the other shore. So all of the nation of Israel are guided by the pillar of cloud. They all go through the dried up Red Sea. God is blessing and providing in miraculous and incredible ways. God cares for his people. And then we kind of get this phrase, baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. Well, we kind of just talked about that, but even with that baptized into Moses, they were figuratively baptized into Moses, the agent God used to deliver them from the Egyptians and to mediate, to give the Old Testament to them. So in much the same way, Christians are baptized into Christ when we baptize, who delivers from sin and gives us the new covenant. So the idea is being immersed in through their deliverer. We are baptized, immersed into Christ. They through Moses, they walk through the sea into freedom to follow God. So this group, this entire group of Israelites, enjoyed physical redemption through the actions of Moses, as we enjoy a lasting and spiritual redemption through Christ. So they came out, and they're wandering around in the wilderness, but things didn't stop there. Verse 3, and all ate the same spiritual food. Oh, I wonder what that is. That is the manna that God provided in the wilderness. Every day except the Sabbath day, God would provide manna from heaven for them to eat. They didn't have to go hunting. They didn't have to go buy food. God provided food for them basically every day through the wilderness. Exodus 16:35, the people of Israel ate the manna 40 years till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan, and then drank the same spiritual drink. Exodus 17:6, behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink. So 2 times, at the very beginning of the wilderness wanderings, and at the very end of the wilderness wanderings, there is a rock. There is no water, and God brings water from the rock for the people. So God is providing food, he's providing water, he's providing guidance, he's providing protection, he's getting them through the Red Sea. God cares for them. He is providing for this entire nation. We get that all over and over and over and over. This entire Exodus generation coming out, God caring for them, providing for them in incredible ways. And then we get this phrase here. They all drank the same spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Now, one commentator said this: he was not thinking of a material, physical rock following them or a movable well, but of the divine source of the water that journeyed with them. He understands the replenishing rock in a spiritual sense, not in a physical sense. God God interprets Israel's rejection of God in the wilderness as prefiguring of their later rejection of Jesus as Messiah. The metaphor of Christ as the rock recalls the imagery of the Messiah as the cornerstone, as the foundation of the church, and there was a problem. God's provision, God's care is lasting, it is faithful, it is enduring, it is stable, but not the people of Israel. Like us, they were not stable. Great blessings do not guarantee great outcomes. Great blessings do not guarantee great outcomes. One great example of that in today's world, according to one website in particular, about 70% of lottery winners go broke or suffer financial ruin within a decade of winning the lottery. So within 10 years of getting millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, they are broke or go bankrupt. 70% of them. Now, we would think, wow, okay, we don't gamble, but if you did, you're like, well, that would be amazing. $100 million, $1 million even. We don't even have to be that generous. $1 million would be life-changing. We would think, great blessing, I wouldn't have to worry about money again. Like, that is incredible. But 70% of lottery winners are in financial ruin within a decade. Great blessings do not mean great outcome. Israel had been given great blessings, incredible blessings, but that didn't guarantee a great outcome for them. God cared for them, but they were not careful to follow him. Look at that, verse 5. Nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Let me read this. Israel failed to run the race with self-discipline in the wilderness. Most of them were disqualified. Paul repeats that all 5 times. We kind of talked about that. But in spite of seeing God spectacularly deliver them, the Israelites sinned so grievously, over and over, I might add, that God was displeased with most of them. God killed every adult Israelite in the wilderness except 2, Joshua and Caleb. The implication is clear. Even though the Corinthian churches enjoy redemption and baptism and Lord's Supper and all these things, they must vigilantly persevere lest they too be disqualified. Now, he's not talking so much about salvation. We don't believe you can lose your salvation. But boy, howdy, you can lose your reputation. You can use God's blessings. You can lose your ability to serve well in the church. You can lose your family. You can lose so much. Even though your salvation is secure in Christ, there is so much to lose, so much to be disqualified from. And so, Paul goes on to these examples for our instruction, these examples of destruction. Now, these things took place as examples for us, that we, and he's listing sins here, might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were. As is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. We must not put Christ to the test as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they are written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the age has come. Wow. Okay. Recapping the opening verses, Charles Spurgeon, a very, very famous British pastor, once remarked, "Yet their privileges did not save them. For while they had the 5 privileges mentioned in these 4 verses, they fell into 5 great sins we read about in verses 6 through 10. And so their privileges, instead of being a blessing to them, only increased their condemnation." Well, what are those 5 great sins? Here we go. They desired evil. Don't desire evil. So sin, well, I guess that just about summarizes everything, I suppose. But They desired evil, they desired wrong, a desire for forbidden things. So Numbers 11 is one of those verses that it's referencing here. God had provided the manna, remember? Unlimited supply of easily obtainable food, but that was not enough. In Numbers 11:4, now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat." And while I can certainly understand that sentiment, their whining and their discontent and their complaining and their craving for something beyond what God had provided for them, in ways whining about it and demanding it in ways that God had not provided. That craving, that desire, that lusting caused them to rebel against God. They wept and wailed against the blessing of God and created such a ruckus that Moses prayed to God and said he couldn't handle the people anymore and asked God to kill him if they kept this up. So this is not just a, hey, God, it would be really great if we could get some meat along with this manna. God probably would have joyfully provided it for them if they had asked properly. But they didn't. That was the level of their discontent. That was the level of their craving. That was the level of their lust. They nearly drove Moses to his grave. And God responds, but first by appointing some other godly men to help govern the nation, take some of that burden off of Moses. Then he gives them what they want. But their cravings were so deep, they were so ungrateful, even when he provided, that many of them died, and the place that they camped at was then named Kibroth Hattaavah, which in English would translate and say, the graves of craving. That is a very dramatic name. So anytime you talk about that place, oh yeah, that place is where all the people were buried who lusted after things that God had not provided, the graves of craving. They abandoned their God. They set their desires on something else, much like those who worshipped idols instead of God. And we're about to get to that, because number 2 is don't be idolaters, as some of them were. And then, as it is written, so we get a direct Old Testament quote this time from Exodus 32. Exodus 32, 4 through 6 says this, and he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with the graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." And they rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. Here's the part that's quoted. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Now, we read rose up to play, and we don't think that sounds too bad, but this word play is the same word about Jacob's flirtatious playing with his wife Rebekah in ways that tipped off the local king that they were married. So we can use our imaginations there. The people had just been rescued by God, brought to Mount Sinai, given manna, drink of the water of the rock. They were now worshiping something other than God. Come on, guys. And that idolatry led to more sin. Don't commit immorality, it tells us, right? We must not indulge in sexual immorality. It's talking about a longer passage in Numbers 25, where, just to read the first couple of verses there, while Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. It's very blunt language here. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. And the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, "Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." And Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you kill those men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor." And behold, oh, look at this brazenness. One of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the people of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose up, left the congregation, took a spear in his hand, and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced them both. The man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel was stopped. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. 1,000. So much like the previous story, idolatry leads to immorality, and sexual lust led to abandoning God, and they were brazen about their sin. They were prideful. They were boasting about it, rubbing it in other people's faces, parading it around, which sounds a lot like today's world. And God took this very seriously. And thankfully others did too. See, these people, and the text makes it clear, it wasn't just that the people of Israel were abandoning their wives and going and partying with evil people. They were going down and worshiping other gods as part of this. They were being unfaithful to God. They were being unfaithful to their families. Now this one guy is pridefully, brazenly bringing back one of these sinful women to his own family. And God is serious about this sin. They were subject to judgment. They were subject to the consequences of their own sin. And because of that, they tested Christ. They tested Christ. They provoked God. In John 3, it compares Jesus to the brass serpent that was lifted up in the wilderness, that all people had to do was look to it and live, and we're about to read about that. But Christ is compared to that. But in Numbers 21, from Mount Hor, they set out by the way to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient on the way. And people spoke against God and against Moses, "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food." Well, that was a lie. "There's no water." God had already provided that. "And we loathe this worthless food." Wait a minute. You don't like the food. You just said there was no food. Come on. Keep your story straight here, guys. "And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many of the people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, 'We have sinned.'" They're finally getting a clue. "We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he'll take the serpents away from us." Well, watch this. As soon as they come and admit that they were sinning, and as soon as they repent, God provides. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, "Make a fiery serpent, set it on a pole. Everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live." So Moses made a bronze serpent, set it on a pole, and if the serpent bit anyone, he would look at the bronze serpent and live. It's where we get the hymn, I think it's in our hymn books, "Look and Live." All they had to do was look at the bronze serpent, and they would live. God provided. But they're putting God to the test. They're putting Christ to the test. Oh boy. Here we go. Last one, right? Verse 10. "Nor grumble." Welp. I think that one's going to be a nice umbrella over just about all of our lives. If there's anything Israel was famous for in the wilderness, it was their grumbling and their moaning and their groaning, which makes it a bit harder to pin down exactly if Paul was thinking about a specific set of verses or like all of the verses. One of them, for example, Numbers 11:1, "And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp." But before we get there, I think there's something clever in this arrangement, placing grumbling here. Because sure, we hear the Israelites went after idols, and we're like, "Nope, not me. I'm not going to worship any statues." And we hear the Israelites pursuing immorality, and we're like, "Yeah, okay, well, I know some friends that did that." That one hits a little bit closer to home. And we hear about them testing Christ and presumptuously assuming he wasn't going to punish their sin. Maybe we're starting to get a little nervous now. And then we hear about the complaining. We don't really have much of a way of denying that one. Or I don't. That's the one we fall into. That's the one I fall into. Numbers 11, it begins with the complaining and the people being destroyed. But Numbers 14, a few chapters later, focuses on the subject. The people are on the edge of the promised land. They have come out of Egypt. They got the law of God. They are on the edge of the promised land, and they send in 12 spies. And you might know how that story went. 12 of them went into the land. They came back out. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, we've heard their names earlier. Joshua and Caleb say, "This is great. Here's all these blessings. God has told us he's going to give us a land. Let's go." And the other 10 were moaning and groaning and complaining, and there are giants in the land and big walls and all these people. They're going to beat us up. There's no way we can take the land of Canaan. And so the people, they listened to the 10. And they complained and they moaned and they groaned and they said, "Nope, nope, nope, God, we are not going in there. We're all going to die." And God said, "Okay, you're all going to die in the wilderness. You're going to miss out on this blessing." And he makes them go round and round in the wilderness. That's 40 years of wandering that we know about. And that whole generation that rejected God's plan, that rejected God's blessings, now get just what they want. And they go and they die in the wilderness. And they grumble and they groan. And we get to verse 11. "Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come." So we're told all these things, and we're told something special about us. We're living at the end of the ages. Now, we may think of end as, well, like, the end. But why have the ages? Why? The world has kept going, right? So I think we're thinking of the wrong kind of end. The end of a race is also the goal, the fulfillment, the main point of the race. And the fulfillment of the mission, the achievement of the target. And perhaps Paul is reminding them that we live in a world where Christ's redemption is complete. His church is established. His sacrifice for sin is paid for. Our eternal redemption, the redemption of all mankind, is paid. The way of salvation is open. Any may decide to follow Jesus, right? The song, "I have decided to follow Jesus," that's open to anyone and everyone. But these warnings, these 5 grave sins, they can take us to our graves just as tempting to us today. We can so easily fall even when we think we're doing so well. God has cared for us, but often we are not careful for him. Last couple of verses we're looking at today. Therefore, lest anyone who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. And then verse 13. "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it." We get some hope. We get some strength, but we also get some very precise warnings. If you crack open a copy of Dr. Seuss's The Cat in the Hat, you will read about that chaotic creature who at one point is bouncing on a ball and trying to carry very, very many household items, from a cake to a rake and from the fish to some dishes, and just when he is so confident, just when he is bragging so loudly, well, this is what happens. I'm going to read you a couple of lines. "This is what the cat said. Then he fell on his head. He came down with a bump from up there on the ball, and Sally and I, we saw all the things fall. Pride cometh before a fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction." The Bible reminds us of that. So take heed, watch out, be careful. As I mentioned earlier, two pastors whom I admired even just in the last few months were found out, disqualified themselves from ministry, one of whom confessed to crime. Both men were very famous in their circles, both men very highly sought after as speakers, both men very famous and influential and loved, and both men were blessed by God, praised by men, but both were not careful. Both abandoned God in their sin. Both neglected being careful. Both neglected being faithful, and now both have their lives ruined. Both churches devastated, both families left in despair. Take heed, be careful, be alert, lest you follow their example. You are not too blessed, you are not too spiritual, you are not too special to fall. So take heed, lest you fall. Be careful, lest you fall. But we get a warning from Paul, then we get a hopeful warning from Paul. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man, that is not human. Your temptations are common. They're known. Others have experienced them as well. Others have struggled with them as well. You are not alone. Now, at first this sounds pretty bad because, boy, howdy, all of humanity is messed up then. Well, yes, that's the world we live in. But it's also meant as a hopeful warning. You aren't alone. You aren't the only one to have faced this. You are going through what others have, and if others have overcome and endured and escaped, so can you. But be careful. Remember, this is common. A warning, a hopeful warning, and finally a solid hope. God is faithful. God cares for you. Be careful for him. Listen to this. God is faithful. and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, and but with the temptation he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. As this verse explains, he'll provide a way of escape. Now, he doesn't promise that way will be easy. He doesn't promise that way will be fun. He doesn't promise that that way will be socially acceptable, or that we will like it. But he promises an escape you can take, and an escape just for you. And in later verses, Paul and God will elaborate on a major temptation of their day, the temptation to go to parties and events in the pagan temples and participate in the feasts and the holidays that were dedicated to the worship of those other gods. They would be shunned if they did not. They would be shamed if they did not. They would be cast out and hated if they did not. But God would be faithful to them. And they had a choice to follow God or reject God and embrace the idols around them. But this reveals a wonderful truth. Our God does not abandon his people in the midst of temptation. So be careful and remember, this is common. These temptations are common to man. But be quick. Be quick to flee sin. Be quick to flee temptation. Be quick. Be careful. And be quick. And don't forget, God cares for you, so be careful for him. As is often said, God doesn't always calm the storm. Sometimes he calms his child. God provides a way of escape so that you can endure it. Sometimes he brings you out of the temptation. Sometimes he gives you the strength you need in that temptation. Either way, he never abandons you in that temptation. If you take nothing else away, remember this: God will not abandon you, so don't abandon him. Your privileges, your previous blessings, your status, your church membership, your parents, your Bible college degrees, your ribbons for memorizing all the verses, they won't keep you from falling. Be faithful to God each and every day. Be close to him. Do not disqualify yourself. Be faithful to God. God cares for you. Be careful for him. God has given you so many blessings. Yet we often reward him by diving into so many sins. God's provision is lasting. It is faithful. It is enduring. It is stable. The people of Israel, not so much. What can be said of your lives? We can be disqualified from service, discarded from his best, distanced from his blessings. Great provision doesn't mean a great outcome. Great blessings doesn't guarantee great outcome. God cares for you, so be careful for him. We are much like that Exodus generation. We have been given untold blessings by God. We hold a precious Bible in our hands, in our language. Even if you don't know how to read well, nearly everyone in here can own and read a beautiful copy of God's Word. We have it on audio. We have it on video. We have all of these things, right? We have a blessing in God's Word, but owning 1,000 Bibles doesn't keep you from sin. Fleeing temptation, being careful for God does. We have a church building here, right? A place we can freely gather week in and week out for praise and worship and teaching and preaching and prayer, but attending every single service and being at every single study will not keep you from sin. Fleeing temptation and being careful for God does. You know, we've got some offering plates here, right? But giving millions of dollars to the church will not keep you from sin. What does? Fleeing temptation, being careful for God. God cares for you. Be careful for him. He has blessed you. How will you respond? Be careful for him. You know that sin you might be toying with, that evil you're flirting with, perhaps even literally. You know that tiny knot of conviction and caution that you ignore when you do that thing, or go those places, or lust after whatever it is or who it is. You know that seed of discontent buried with the grain of grumbling will always yield fruit. Sin will always bring death of a relationship, death of joy, death of hope, death of your family ties, death of your job, maybe even physical death, but always the death of blessings. Always, always, always is the fruit of sin. The Corinthians needed that reminder. They lived in a pagan culture, an ungodly culture, an immoral culture, much like we do today. It's what it looks like is refusing to go to the bar and get drunk with the other work buddies. It's refusing to watch that pornographic TV series that everyone else at your job is talking about. Maybe it's refusing to dress yourself or your daughters in that outfit that no decent person should be wearing. It's not allowing the worship of your hobbies to come between you and your Sunday worship of God. Yes, standing for God will ostracize you. Yes, it'll make you look weird. Yes, it'll make you stand out. And that's good. We're not here to fit in. We're redeemed by God. We're saved from sin. We're rescued from the rotten death of evil and washed by the blood of the Lamb. If you've been saved, if you've believed in Jesus, if you've given your life to follow Jesus, we've been saved by the power of the risen Christ. We've been set apart as holy, for God is holy. We've been blessed and commissioned for his cause. We are pilgrims who do not belong here. We have a heavenly home, and it's okay. It's probably good. It is good for us not to fit in here in every way. God cares for you. Be careful for him. God sent Jesus Christ, his son, to live a perfect life, die on the cross in our place, and rise again to bring victory over death and the grave, and to bring deliverance from sin and strife, to bring hope to the dying and change to the living. Jesus transformed us, saved us, rescued us, provided for us, blessed us. God cares for you. Be careful for him. Even when you face rejection, even when you feel alone, even when you don't fit in, even when you are strange in their eyes, choose Christ. The choice is clear. Choose Christ or choose death. Christ brings salvation and blessing and care, and sin brings disappointment and death and destruction. For the sake of your homes and your families and your reputations and your testimony as a Christian, you cannot give sin an inch. You must be careful. You must take heed. You must pay attention. You must be alert. God cares for you. Be careful for him. If you want a blessed life, a good life, a rich in God's goodness kind of life, you must follow God faithfully. You must not disqualify yourself. Great blessings do not guarantee great outcomes. You cannot coast in this life. You must be careful. So I urge you one last time this morning, as we get ready to close out, as I get ready to pray, walk out with this statement if you remember nothing else. God cares for you. Be careful for him. Be careful for him. Lord, you are good.